Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in to Brown Coat Reviews. I am your host Laura. Now here at Brown Coat Reviews we do a variety of different series. We have comic book reviews, we show some cool collections showcasing some amazing artists. We go behind the scenes at different live shows, comic book shops, show you some of those amazing anniversary or warehouse sales. And then we have everyone's favorite series, Married with Comics. That's right. You get a chance to talk to myself and my husband as we show off our pull list, talk about the stories that he reads, I read, the stories that we both read together, and we have some other amazing videos planned for that series, so please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel because we are growing at an amazing rate and you're not going to want to miss any of the content that we have coming. So today we're going to talk about the other history of the DC Universe. Now, what John Ridley has done, if you don't know who John Ridley is the Oscar nominated, and I believe he was the Oscar winning writer of 12 Years a Slave. Great writer, but this was actually the first time he'd ever written a comic book. It does show a little bit. So you can tell within his writing that there's a lot of writing, there is some pictures, but overall the story is full of words. Because he's building sort of an entire world. What the other history of the DC Universe is trying to do is to give a minority character a chance to really shine. And you really get a chance to see, obviously, their history, but you see how they fit into this DC Universe where most of us know about Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. It's a great series. Now, first issue talks about Black Lightning. Second issue talks about a married couple, which is Bumblebee and Hal the Hornblower. So sorry. For these two issues, I actually went into a lot of detail on them and showcased more of these titles in my Black History Month Marvel vs. DC video. Information's in the description box if you want to check out that video. And this month, we have our first female minority character, which is Katana, in issue number 3. Now, really quick, what you can expect from this series. What John Ridley does is he does two different things with these individual issues. Is he will show off, number one, an interaction with a larger character in the DC universe. So, for instance, Mal and Bumblebee, they both worked and interacted with Teen Titans. Black Lightning, of course, worked with Batman and was a member of Batman and the Outsiders. And Katana, of course, was also a member of the Outsiders, so she has a lot of interactions with Batman. So you get a chance to see how the larger superheroes had a positive or a negative impact on their lives and their progression within the DC universe and how they grew. The second thing that I really appreciate is that John Ridley will show off a lot of very important historical events and tie it into, again, how these characters grew, whether it held them back or pushed them forward. So we do hear about the Atlanta murderers, and in this one, we hear about the Asian concentration camps that were here in the United States. If you've never heard about those camps, you can Google it. Take a look. There are some amazing real life famous Asian Americans who were in those camps who talk about their experience. And I was so glad that they made a point of having Katana talk about that experience and what it was like to be a Japanese woman in the United States during World War II. Very interesting. Now, my experience or my knowledge of Katana was that big. I knew her from Suicide Squad. And yes, that is the movie that we all love to hate. Because we just really want a Snyder cut. We want it to be done better. And a heck of a lot less of the Joker. But I'm going to try not to go on a rant and rave. Let's focus in on Katana. Now, in the Suicide Squad movie, most of us will remember Katana was obviously the one with the really cool white mask. She had obviously a katana blade, sword that she was wielding. Looked like there was some sort of mystical powers associated with it, and she was always kind of whispering to her sword. Okay, But beyond that, we learn almost nothing about the character. She's just quiet and deadly. Which means as a whole, there's not much for you to kind of go off of and be like, oh, that's the best character. That's our Wolverine. That's the one that we look forward to rooting for. So when John Ridley picked this character, I couldn't wait to find out more about what makes her tick. And there, of course, is that famous mask. This series, like I've said, we talk about the sword, we talk about her experience, and the interesting thing, of course, yes, you do see the gymnastics here, she was actually never trained in martial arts. So she is not, a Bruce Lee incarnate. Instead, she's just a woman who knew how to use gymnastics and was forced into a situation where she did pick up this sword. You find out how. And eventually started killing a lot of people in the name of vengeance. She then does start, wielding her sword for other reasons, but you also learn a bit about why she changes. Now, she, like I said, was a member of the Outsiders, and there is Black Lightning, and you do actually get some really intriguing moments where if you read issue number 1 and then you read issue number 3, you see how she talks about his journey. And so again, you're getting almost like issue number 1, but from a slightly different perspective. Not always discussing the same events. So that I thought also was really cool. The big key difference that I will mention, so I'm just going to keep showing off some of the art because it's gorgeous. And you have this mystical sword, of course, Soul Taker. But it's actually not mystical. What happened is word of mouth spread about this woman who was an assassin, and she's always kind of talking to herself. She's all alone. She's lost her family. They have been butchered, which is why she goes on a vengeance spree. And she's just muttering to herself. So just like most urban legends kind of spread, someone thought that she must be talking to the sword. And then suddenly this huge legend builds of, oh, she's talking to the sword, and look at what the sword is doing. And it kind of builds onto itself, just like people assumed that she was a martial arts specialist. That's fine. Let people believe what they can, because she realized, just like Batman did, that fear gets you quite a great deal of movement. The only difference is Batman refused to kill anyone, and she had no qualms with it. So we have Katana, who has sort of this false identity that she's okay with. And then we start moving on through this series. And we learn more about not just the vengeance spree, but then how she's changed because of Batman and the Outsiders. And the moment when eventually Batman leaves Batman and the Outsiders, and they're just the Outsiders. And eventually it is just Katana on her own. There are some really, really great moments here. I mean, I can't just pick one. I will say, overall, there were a lot of misconceptions that I had about Katana because I didn't really know a lot about her as a character. But I felt, because of this series, that suddenly I had a newfound understanding. And I really looked forward to someone giving me more perspective into this amazing person. So this is the section about the roundup of the Japanese Americans. And we talk about hate crimes that are committed against Chinese Americans who were not Japanese, they were just Asian. And you have people who were born in the United States, but because their skin tone was a different color, were treated very differently. And how the justice system was just as corrupt against people of Asian descent. So, considering how far we have come since then, we have a lot more room for growth. Overall, there's this beautiful pinnacle moment, and that is the duel between Lady Shiva and Katana. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil what happens during that duel. I'll just say that that moment is one of the many reasons that I respect Katana. And like I said, I want to see her fleshed out more in the DC universe. She is very intriguing. And like I said, I knew nothing about her. I know she shows up in a couple different series, but it's almost like having the token black guy. She's just been the token Asian guy, or token Asian woman, who just kind of stands in the background and wields a sword every once in a while. So giving her the spotlight was really cool, and it was a very unique opportunity that I'm so glad that they did. Compared to the other two series. Now, Black Lightning, this first issue is undoubtedly going to stay my favorite. It was the first one. It set the standard. And I mean, my expectation as soon as I finished this book it was set so high because I thought John Ridley just hit it out of the park. This was a phenomenal story, and I couldn't wait to read more. Issue 2 was good. The problem was, because issue number 1 was so good, that when we suddenly started seeing the formula of, like I said, you get the introduction of the other famous characters, see where they fit in the DC universe, and then of course you have the historical events, it was very good. And I really liked the couple kind of play off of each other, how they'll talk about the same situation, but then they'll be approaching it from a different perspective. I really liked that. But I didn't like this one as much as the first issue. What can you do? This issue with Katana, again, it surprised me. I learned more about a character that I didn't know very much about, and now I do. The historical events in this. Yes, I was aware of the camps that we had in the United States against Japanese Americans. And I have heard some of the survivor stories. George Takei was one of the actors who recently came to the GalaxyCon here in Raleigh, and he spoke about it, and his story is incredibly moving. So having that understanding and that kind of background, I was expecting a little bit more from this story. They did touch on it, absolutely. They talk about it. They talk about some of the injustices that were done against Asian people. I personally could have used a little bit more, because I know that some of these situations, I mean, you could probably fill double the amount of book with some of these other historical events that took place and what happens once those Japanese American camps are closed. They do talk a bit about the differences in the experiences with people who were Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, and Korean Americans. And how, of course, everyone's just lumped together as an Asian American. But again, I'm looking at it going, you're still scratching the surface. There's still so much more that they could do with this series, which it does definitely open it up that if they ever decide to continue this series and they do kind of a part 2 of Katana's story, I think that there's a lot of potential for this. It definitely hit all the key elements that it needed to. I wanted just a little bit more. So, very well done, but I will have to say Black Lightning was still the best. Even though this one was still a very worthy read, there was something that was so unique, and just I empathized, and I jumped right into that story of being so angry at the injustices. And if I had that kind of superpower, I can understand how I would let it destroy outward, and in some ways how it would destroy inwardly. And I loved that about this series. Katana, absolutely. I understood her vengeance streak. But I did feel I was still missing just a little bit. And there's, like I said, just that one little element that's missing, and I can't put my fingers on it. But I will say, again, it's a great story. It is one that we need to be reading. So if you are not as familiar with these historical events, I'm so glad that John Ridley is highlighting them. And it's possible that a lot of other readers will sit there and say, well, they covered more than enough. I don't want to read any more about the horrific things that have happened in history. I want to move forward. So it's possible that everyone else may be disagreeing with me on this. So maybe he did reach that beautiful little balance of giving us the history without going too far over the top. I don't know. But I will say the series has been amazing. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it yet, I know at some point there's going to be a trade. Grab it. It is phenomenal. And I know for sure that I will not be reading Birds of Prey, Suicide Squad, or any of the other comic book series and seeing Katana the same way again. And yes, I do have a couple Batman and the Outsider books. I'll get there eventually. So the big question for you all is, have you read any of the comic book series with Katana in it? What was your first impression of her? And then, of course, for those of us who had seen her in Suicide Squad, the movie, did you like her portrayal? Or did you feel that it was a little flat? Have you read the Other History of the DC Universe Katana issue? And are you now seeking out stories with Katana, or were you just satisfied to know more and kind of carry on with your other DC Universe titles? And if she appears, even better. Let me know down in the comments, and I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. This is Laura from Brown Coat Reviews. Like I said, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because we are going to be seeing you all again very soon.